Get Rich Education is brought to you by Ridge Lending Group, Apartment Investor Mastery, and Producers Wealth.
You're listening to the show that has created more passive income for people than nearly any show in the world. This is the powerful Get Rich Education.
Welcome to Get Rich Education, episode 188. Hi, I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. We're going to talk about how to create your own economy, about how you run your numbers on an income property, and we're going to use a real address. And then we're going to discuss the people part of real estate investing. So if you've ever wondered how I would run real numbers on a real living, breathing income property today, well, you're going to see me do that in just a few minutes here. You know, a lot of people like to point to the economy and use it as a crutch for when things are not going right for them financially. When things are going well for someone financially, a prideful person, they might even call themselves a self-made multi-millionaire. And I guess I could even call myself that if I wanted to. But look, no one ever calls themselves a self-made median income earner, even if that's exactly what they are. My point is that you are where you are because of you and nobody else, not because of the government, not because of Trump's tax plan. It wasn't because of anything Obama did. It isn't because of tariffs, but chiefly and predominantly because of you. It really doesn't even have as much to do with the economy in your local area as it does with you. You've got to create multiple income streams yourself. And the good news here is that you have the ability to create your own economy, and that is always going to impact you more than these other outside forces that you have less control over. And I've actually got a great example for you. My mind just recently strung this together. Okay, 2 weeks ago, I left my hometown of Anchorage, AK. That place is in an economic recession, and there's job loss and population loss. And yet I'm thriving personally because of my own decisions. Last week, I was in Reading, Pennsylvania, my birthplace. The New York Times recently named Reading as the poorest city in all of America. This week, I'm visiting upstate Pennsylvania. It's called Coudersport. Recessions here, job losses are here, population losses are here too. This is where I've lived most of my life. So all three of those places, where I live now, where I was born, and where I was raised, they're all in a recession, even at a time when most U.S. economies are growing. Well, how do you grow your economy in a way that's not heavily influenced by government and geography and more? It's that you choose to, you decide to do that. Buy the real estate that produces housing and that produces food, things that people are going to need, residential and agricultural. When you buy the real estate underneath these innate human needs, now you have a chance to leverage other people's money and produce income at the same time. You know that you need to generally buy in cash flowing real estate markets that are away from the coasts. Those coastal markets are what I call the volatile markets, and you can create a more stable personal economy for yourself when you buy in several different geographic markets scattered across the Midwest and South. We call those the stable markets. Those income streams are going to follow you wherever you go. And you see, those income streams are following me today, despite the fact that I'm in recessionary Appalachian, Pennsylvania. I don't follow money. I've chosen to make money follow me. You can too. The tenant rent checks pass through the property manager and into your bank account. Now you've created your own economy. I want you to develop your own personal economy that can supersede geography and supersede, governments or a presidential administration. A novice investor, what does a novice investor do? They only buy property in their hometown. That is risky. That's not a durable, healthy personal economy. That same novice investor, they justify what they're doing by thinking and saying things like, well, at least I can go see the property. And, oh, it's okay over there because the rent income covers my mortgage. That's good enough. The novice investor, they also say things like, I can't wait until I have this property paid off. That right there is risk, risk, risk with a sprinkle, a hint of living below your means in there. Look, your income property is basically just a widget that secures your income stream. I don't want to have any property paid off, not even my own home. See, that way, if you pay things off, you're impairing your ability to leverage more widgets that secure more income streams for you. And look, once you hold on to your widget, your income property for more than about 10 years, you're going to start getting hit with CapEx costs. Now you need a new water heater. Now a couple appliances need to be replaced. Soon it's about time to paint the exterior again. Oh, look, now there's something wrong with the garage door. On the day that you buy it, your property is rehabbed from top to bottom with new components, new flooring, oftentimes a new roof, nearly everything. So in that, 12th year or whatever, not only do you get hit with these capital expenditures I'm mentioning, what's perhaps even worse is that now you've got 50% equity in the property and you've been losing your velocity of money all these years. Now that right there is a double whammy for the novice. Don't let your money get lazy. Now you've just dented your personal economy. You might have even become emotional about a property, and that makes you want to hold on to it rather than viewing it as a mere widget. Okay, that's why I like to think of an income property as a widget, because you don't get emotionally attached to a widget. All right, let's run the numbers on an actual income property, a real life address here on one that you might consider for purchase, okay? And you've probably never heard anyone do this. I think you're really going to get a ton of value from this, because we're going to go all the way through and calculate your projected total rate of return on a real life property. So what I'm going to do here in real time is I am going to go to greturnkey.com. I'm going to click on the Memphis Turnkey Provider, which leads me right to midsouthhomebuyers.com. I'm going to click on available properties in there and then scroll down a little. And this brings me to, say we'll pick this property here, 1502 Marycrest Drive, Memphis, Tennessee. Yeah, let's use this one. Now, the sale price here for this rehabbed 3-bed, 2-bath, single-family income property is $74,000. If you're looking at buying property at like a higher purchase price than this, I mean, this example still ought to scale up for you because I'm often going to be talking in ratios here. So I can see on the map that accompanies this listing at midsouthhomebuyers.com that 1502 Marycrest Drive in Memphis is in the southeast quadrant of Memphis, okay? And it has a rent income of $795. All right, well, that's a great sign right there already, because $795 a monthly rent divided by a $74,000 total purchase price, that's a rent to price ratio of more than 1%, which is like phenomenal today. And a lot of markets can't do that. And that's a calculation that you can do in your head in like 1 second. And if a property has a ratio of monthly rent income to total purchase price of more than 7/10, or really ideally more than 0.8%, it's often worth looking into further to break down all the numbers. So let's do that from here. Break down all the numbers on this property. And before we do that, just scrolling around, I can also see that both bathrooms in this single family home have like a tile backsplash. And that living room right there might even have real hardwood floors. I can't tell for sure looking at these photos whether that's real or laminate. And I have been in Memphis homes just like this that do have real hardwood floors at purchase prices like this that attract real tenants that pay the rent month after month in decent neighborhoods, okay? And, it looks like this property is already under contract. So getting onto the numbers, let's see what kind of cash flow 1502 Marycrest Drive is projected to provide for you. And of course, all these are numbers that we're going to verify through the provider later. So $795, that's your monthly rent income. We're going to subtract out all of your monthly expenses to determine your cash flow. We need to subtract out your mortgage and your operating expenses, so let's do that together. So it looks like their website helps us do that here with their Customize Your Cash Flows tool. I'm going to plug in for you that you'll use a 20% down payment and a 30-year loan like most people would. I'll put in your mortgage interest rate at 5.5% here. That also means that I'm going to open up another tab here so I can plug your mortgage interest rate and loan info into a loan amortization calculator. Okay, so back here on the Mid-South site, I'm going to tick the box for the subtraction of your city and county taxes you have to pay, which appear to be $1,117 annually. That's $93 a month subtracted off your rent. I'm going to tick the box that says you do want property management, which takes 10% from your gross rent. If you choose to self-manage for some reason, I mean, then just like with any property, you would need to subtract out what your time is worth, okay? And then I'm going to tick your box for property insurance at $30 per month. Okay, now you know that I like to use the acronym VIM. It's just a really easy way for you to remember your operating expenses. VIMTUM, again, is vacancy insurance, maintenance, taxes, utilities, and management. So your cash flow is rent income minus mortgage and VIMTUM. So here we go. $795 is your monthly rent. So from that, we're going to subtract out your mortgage, principal, and interest. That is $336 per month. Now we're going to subtract out your operating expenses, your VIMTUM. So the first is vacancy. Let's use 4% of the gross monthly rent. That's $32 a month subtracted off your rent amount, minus your insurance. We said that's $30 per month, minus your maintenance. Let's use 7%. I mean, your property is fully rehabbed, so it might be lower than this in early years and more in the later years. That's minus $56, minus your property tax. Tax is the T in VIMTUM. We said that was $93. We got that from the listing. Minus your utilities. Yeah, the tenant typically pays all these in your single-family rental, but you might have a little utility payment if your property is vacant a few weeks each year. Let's call that $60 a year or $5 a month that we'll subtract here. And then finally, minus your management, which we said was 10%. Let's make that 12% because you might have to pay a leasing fee too. So that's minus $95 per month. Okay, so what do you get for monthly cash flow? You've got $795 in rent income, minus the mortgage and the VIMTUM operating expenses. That is a total of $148 of monthly income in your pocket, relatively passively, most months completely passively. So what do you think? Was that too conservative? Was that too liberal? If you think that was too conservative, you know, it's a lot nicer to be pleasantly surprised and feel like your property under-promised and over-delivered for you. And I'm about to get more conservative because remember, you should have some liquidity as a contingency reserve for your property too. I like it when you have up to 5% of the property's value in liquidity. So in this case, with this Marycrest Drive place and its $74,000 purchase price, holding as much as $3,000 to $4,000 liquid, that could be a good idea. Remember, we've already paid for property insurance, so you've hedged yourself against some losses that way when we ran your numbers. And then you have the liquidity in addition to that. So we're talking about running the numbers that matter on your income property. And come on, that wasn't too bad, was it? There wasn't too many numbers. You see, the nice thing about real estate math is that there's nothing complex here for us. It's just addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. That's it. There's no trigonometry. There's no calculus. We're not using exponents. It's really just knowing where to find the numbers and what numbers to use. And you know, here's something else. If you think numbers are boring, here's what you do. Put a dollar sign next to them, all right? It gets more interesting. And then beyond that, then realize that those dollar signs, they don't represent someone else's money. That represents your money, and it gets really interesting, okay? And now, I mean, if you've never self-managed, then to you, property management might just look like a line item expense. But if you have self-managed, like I did my own properties for the first 5.5 years, which was too long, big mistake. But if you've self-managed, then you might just love your manager. All right, well, we went through that to determine your passive monthly payday is $148. Okay, now let's determine your total rate of return from 1502 Marycrest Drive in Memphis as best we can with the 5 ways that real estate simultaneously pays you. The first way is with appreciation. The national historic number is 6% appreciation. Let's just play it way safer here and call it 3% appreciation on this property. Well, that doesn't sound very thrilling if the real rate of inflation is also 3%, but you've got 5-to-1 leverage because you only use a 20% down payment. So you've 5x'd inflation, or maybe you've nearly 5x'd it because remember, you paid about 4% in closing costs when you bought this property. So that's 20% for the down payment plus the closing costs. So that's 24% of the purchase price out of pocket. That comes out to 12.5% leveraged gain from appreciation for you. And if you don't understand that, listen to some earlier episodes about leverage. We already determined that your cash flow is $148 a month. That's $1,776 annually, divided by the amount of skin in the game that you played at the closing table, that 24% of purchase price, which is $17,760. That's exactly a 10% cash-on-cash return. It's nice how that worked out. Now you're up to a 22.5% return just from appreciation in cash flow. Thirdly, look at the amount of your principal loan balance that your tenant has paid down for you that I'm grabbing here from the amortization table. That's about $66 a month times 12 to annualize it. That is $792 divided by your skin in the game. Okay, that is about another 4.5% return to you. Let's just round that down to 4 because say that you do have a few weeks of vacancy each year, call that 4%. Then the fourth of 5 ways you're paid is the inflation hedging on this property's $59,200 loan. We'll call that 3%. Remember, the bank only asks you to repay your loan in nominal dollars over time, not dollars that are indexed to inflation back at the time that you originated the loan. And now with those 4 out of 5 ways, you're up to a 29.5% rate of return with the generous tax benefits that you receive on both your rent income and your opportunity to pay 0 capital gains tax on the appreciation with the 1031 exchange. I know Tom Wheelwright was here a few weeks ago getting us pretty excited about bonus depreciation, and it is pretty great, but let's just err toward the cautious and kind of think about the longer term, and we'll call your total annual gain 32% plus. So there it is, your total rate of return. Pretty nice return. And of course, there are 0 guarantees. You could even lose money. And importantly, the thing about a cash flowing instrument like this is that, think about it, even if your property goes down in value, you've already got some cash out of it because you're getting this monthly cash flow, and you've had your tenant paying down the principal for you too. Even if it went down in value, you've got something out. So I've received really quite a bit of positive feedback on the 5 ways real estate investors are paid. A lot of people told me that they love hearing this and that they'd never heard this before. Just a couple people, like 2, have asked, now why don't you count instant equity as a 6th way that you're paid? Okay, that basically means when the property appraises for more than you buy it for. Like, for example, on this Marycrest Drive one, what if it appraised for $78K and you bought it here for $74K? Well, that's another $4,000 instant equity return right there on the day that you close. I mean, that might happen to you, and that would be great. And I wouldn't call it a rare thing, but it's definitely not like the norm. So because it's not that common, I exclude that, and I do not count that as a 6th way that you're paid. Now, if you start an active business and put yourself in position to buy distressed properties below market value, well, then equity capture could happen more often. But in that case, you've definitely left the passive world. You're talking about a full-on job where you're building systems to send yellow letters and you're launching marketing campaigns, tracking down leads and fixing properties. And I'm not saying that a person can't go do all that stuff, but now it's just no longer an investment. It's a job. And, why don't more people talk about the total rate of return in real estate like this? I don't know. I just don't get it. When you're talking about investing, run your numbers and know where your return's coming from. And once in a while, determine your rate of return as best you can. What most people do instead is they self-manage properties in their own hometown, and they feel like they have to manage it themselves, or else the property won't cash flow if they hire management. Well, that problem then is probably because they didn't buy right and they don't have a margin. Buy a property with that margin for management. Most markets don't have monthly rent incomes to purchase prices that are 8/10 or better, and there's just no margin for management there. So now you've got someone self-managing that's making less profit than an in-the-know person like you that buys in investor advantage geographies from greturnkey.com. So what you're doing is you're getting a better return passively than the mom and pop do-it-yourselfer is getting actively. And well, that's really the power of knowledge right there. You know that in the past, I've belittled the myth of compound interest. Compound interest is lame compared to leverage. Well, think about compounding cash flows. Look, when you have passive income like you do from this Mary Crest Drive place, now you're accumulating liquidity faster so you can buy your next one and have even more cash flow. And now you can buy your next one even faster, compounding even more cash flow. Compound cash flows. You are poised to do substantially better than your peers that are pinning their hopes on speculative capital gains from stocks for sure. Well, hey, we are about done with the numbers today. Just imagine something. Imagine you were the age where you haven't been out of college long, say just age 25, and you're just sort of finding your place in the world, both personally and professionally. And you know that you're interested in real estate, and you just went all out, traveling around to all these events where thought leaders were speaking to like-minded audiences. And say you're paying thousands of dollars regularly in travel expenses and event fees to go to New York and Dallas and Belize and Miami and more places, and you're meeting Robert Kiyosaki and you're having dinner with Gary Vaynerchuk. Well, we're going to catch up with a young person that is doing just that. I'm going to ask him why he's doing it, and I'm also going to ask him how exactly he can afford to pay for all this. In fact, I got to meet this fellow young guy at a couple of these in-person events, each of them in the last year, and we've caught a meal together and worked out at the gym. He'll tell you just exactly what he's learned from all these prestigious events he's attending. He's moving fast, but we're going to catch up with him in a minute. Now, if that, with what I discussed earlier, was a few too many numbers flying around for you, I wrote about the 5 ways that real estate investors are paid in my book last year, so you can check it out at your own pace. And did you know that that book is selling better now than when it came out last year, which is amazing to me? Robert Sislow, if you would please tell them how to get the e-version of my book, 7 Money Myths, completely free. Start by introducing the problem and then the solution. I'll be right back.
71% of Americans aren't saving enough for retirement. It's going to get worse as people live longer, and you need to start thinking differently. But you can't lose your time. Real estate is the investment vehicle that's made more ordinary people wealthy than anything else. Keith Weinhold of Get Rich Education is host of one of America's top investing shows, Disrupting Wall Street. He's an international best-selling author, a writer for Rich Dad Advisors, and has been an active income property investor since 2002. He has created thousands in passive monthly income for countless followers, and now he has a free book, The 7 Principles for Creating Wealth in Your Life. Get your copy now at GetRichEducation.com/book. That's GetRichEducation.com/book. Because invest in what produces income for you now and later. Sign up now at GetRichEducation.com/book.
MC Laubscher is the host of the top-rated business and investing podcast, Cash Flow Ninja, and also the president of Producers Wealth. Producers Wealth assists people in creating, protecting, and perpetually multiplying wealth in any economy through creating processes that help them increase their production, provide them with liquidity, passive income generators, and opportunities for enormous growth. Learn more about their time-tested and proven systems at yourownbankingsystem.com. For an income property investor like you that needs an income property loan, go to Ridge Lending Group. And over the years, you've heard owner Chaley Ridge generously give her time to you right here on the show as a guest. Ridge provides investment property loans in almost every U.S. state, and you're going to find out how they've helped more Americans realize their dreams of financial freedom through real estate than any other mortgage lender in the entire nation when you get started at ridgelendinggroup.com.
Hi, this is Rich Dad Advisor Garrett Sutton. You're listening to the always valuable Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Today, I've got a 25-year-old friend on the show that began his real estate career at Sotheby's International Realty, where he represented luxury custom builders. And then he moved down to the Caribbean, which is where I ended up meeting him for the first time. He was there to manage business development for a resort in Belize. Today, he's the director of investor relations at Four Peaks Capital Partners. They're a private real estate investment firm focusing on mobile home park communities. He is now the best-selling co-author of the brand new book that just came out, The One Thing That Changed Everything. He's based in Houston, Texas. Welcome onto the show, Inaky Strick.
Hey, Keith. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you here. Now, someone might say, wow, that is quite a collection of experiences for a 25-year-old. But you know what? That might look small compared to the investing events that you're attending live and in person really all over the Western Hemisphere and all these amazing thought leaders that you're meeting. And I ended up running into you at one of these events again recently. And, you're really good about sharing the events with others, making Instagram posts about them, maybe doing Facebook live streams from the events. So just tell us about some of these experiences and what you're learning.
Yeah, that's right. I do attend a lot of events. And most recently, I just came back from the Real Estate Guys Investor Summit at Sea. And oh my gosh, that was an amazing 12 days with lots of great speakers. But one thing that stood out to me was Robert Kiyosaki's session where he was talking about the concept of be, do, have. And he essentially taught us that most people want to have. They want to have the nice house. They want to have the nice car. They want to have wealth. And they focus on that. And he's saying that if you focus on the having, first, it's going to take you a lot longer to get there. You first must focus on the being. You must figure out who you need to be, who you need to become, how you need to behave, so then you can go out and do the things necessary in order to have what you want. So I thought that was a very, very interesting concept that I learned just from Robert Kiyosaki at the Investor Summit at Sea.
That's right. And I was last on that Summit at Sea at 2016, one of the greatest events I've ever attended. And yeah, be, do, have. And it is in that order because have, that kind of lends more into consumption, but you really need to start with production. Be, do, have. What else did you learn?
Yeah, so a different event that I went to was the Future of Money and Wealth. And in this one, Chris Martenson and Adam Taggart, they're the founders of Peak Prosperity. They talk about the 8 different forms of capital. And usually we think of capital as financial capital, which is one of the forms of it. But then there's also living capital, which that's your personal health, being in shape, plants, bees, and anything that's alive. Then we have material capital, and this includes solar panels, durable things that enhance your life, like cars. Then we have knowledge capital, which these are your skills that you learn and you practice every day. And then we have emotional capital, which they say is the most important one, because if you have capital in all the other areas, but your emotional capital is down, then it essentially doesn't matter what else you have. And then we have social capital, and this is how well you know and trust people. This is not the number of friends you have on Facebook, but rather how many people you actually know very well and trust them. And then you have cultural capital, which this in your area, you either have it or you don't. So an example is there was an earthquake in Japan and there was no looting and there were no fights. And then you take a look at Katrina and there was all sorts of violence. So the difference there was cultural capital.
That's a great point. Yeah, cultural capital is one of those 8 forms we don't often think about. I'm glad you brought this up, Inaky, because we had Chris Martenson on the show a few months ago to talk about the 8 forms of capital. So this is a good way to check in with our listeners here about 3 months later. How well are you doing on those things? Are you following up on those 8 forms of capital? How well do you know your neighbor? What else did you learn?
Yeah, so I went to a different event called How to Win Funds and Influence People. And this was a sales training event put on by Russell Gray. And this was specifically for syndicators, people that want to raise capital to allow other investors to partner with them and invest in bigger real estate deals. So talking to the syndicators, he taught me that it's never, ever, 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 ever about me. And what he meant by that is that you need to not lead with your needs, but rather find out what the investor is looking for. Do they need capital gains? Are they looking for cash flow? Do they need tax benefits? And if you're not able to provide what it is that they're looking for, then find somebody else that can and match them up with them. Don't try to fit a round peg into a square hole.
That's such a great point. Yes, the conversation becomes about them. It's kind of the whole How to Win Friends and Influence People, the classic book by Dale Carnegie. You know, you need to show interest in the other person before yourself. So, yeah, that totally resonates through.
Yeah, and then the next event that I went to was in Dallas, Texas, and this is where I met Kyle Wilson. Kyle Wilson, he was the 18-year business partner of Jim Rohn, and
Right.
He founded Jim Rohn International. And I don't know about if your listeners listen to Jim Rohn, but he's one of my favorite personal development guys.
Jim Rohn, he came up with the classic, you are the average of the 5 people that you choose to spend the most time with.
That's right. And I actually put that quote in my chapter in the book. And that's pretty much what I talk to in my story on the one thing that changed everything. I talk about whatever it is that you want to do in life, you must find those who are already successful in doing so, add value to them, and surround yourself with them. And that is why I go to all these live events, because I want to be a successful real estate investor. Well, there's no better place to find those people than at live events for real estate investors. So that's essentially what I've been doing by going to these live events. And yes, you get some great content, but to me, the relationships that I have built at these events are the most valuable thing.
If you want to change yourself, the quickest and easiest way to do that is change your circle. And few things can do that like live events. Podcasts, webinars are great, but you don't meet anyone that way. Oh, and I've got a great example of that, Inaky. If you and I didn't believe in going to live events, we wouldn't be chatting right now because we wouldn't know each other.
We saw each other down in Belize, and then we saw each other at the New Orleans Investment Conference. And that's right. If we didn't go to live events, we would have never met.
That's right. Where else have you gone? What else have you learned?
Just kind of going back to Kyle Wilson, he taught me about the concept of the wheel. And if you can picture a wheel with different spokes, and the spokes are your products and services, these are different ways to attract customers or clients or people into your world. So, for example, you have the podcast, you have Get Rich Education, you have your book, and these are different ways to attract people. And then once they're in your world, you need to take them around the wheel or communicate with them so that they can learn more about you, about your different products and services.
That's a great point. I guess I kind of am doing that at Get Rich Education because I realize some people don't know how to listen to podcasts, so I've been putting more videos on our YouTube channel. Some people don't interact with any of those media types, so that's why I wrote a book. So, yeah, that's a great point.
Right. Well, you want to have different ways to attract people and then also communicate with them to let them know all the different avenues that they can learn from you.
What else have you learned? Where else have you gone?
The most valuable thing, I mean, if I hadn't gone to the Real Estate Investors Summit at Sea by the Real Estate Guys last year, I would have never met Robert Helms and Russell Gray. So I eventually went down and moved down to Belize and worked for them because I met them. Then I moved back to Texas, and at that same event is where I met Andrew Illinois and Mike Ayala, who that's the people that I work for now at Four Peaks Capital Partners. That's my biggest takeaway. I mean, going to these live events can open up so many opportunities. I mean, not just the content, but the relationships that you build, especially if you're an aspiring real estate investor. You can surround yourself with people that are successful by going to these events. And, you know, you never know. So maybe you can end up working with somebody and growing your business that way as well.
You keep showing up in the same places as these same influential people and thought leaders, and they keep seeing you, and you're ambitious and you're inquisitive. You ask a lot of questions, and well, that makes them want to hire you. So they've actually been your employers that you're finding at these events, as it turns out, even though that was probably a completely unintended consequence of you attending them.
That's right. It was not necessarily planned, but it's just how it turned out to be. So attending live events has changed my life in more ways than I could have ever imagined.
Yeah, well, great. And I know all those good guys over there, Andrew and Michael at Four Peaks Capital Partners. Well, someone might wonder, well, wait a second. Now, you're only 25 years old, and maybe a listener's thinking, well, I'd love to go to some of these events, no matter what age I am. How in the heck do you afford the time and the money to be flying across the country and oftentimes outside the country to get to all these great events and meet all these thought leaders?
That's a great question, Keith. I started out with the first event that I went to. The price tag was way out of my budget, to be honest. At the time, I had just graduated college. I had just started selling real estate. It was a little bit high price for me, but I knew that I had to be there. I had a feeling that by going to that event, it would dramatically change my life. And so I did a little research and figured out that by going on the Real Estate Guys website, they actually had a young adults program to where they essentially cut the price tag in half. I'll be honest, even then at half the price, it was a little high for me. So then I figured out that they could also sponsor me. So I sent them a video applying for this sponsorship, and I won it, or I earned it, I guess. And the price I got cut in half again. So I was able to go on that first event by figuring out how to actually do it. If there's a will, there's a way. So I just went out and figured out how to do it. After that, after meeting all these amazing people and essentially working for them, now as the director of investor relations at Four Peaks, it is my job to go to events. So now my job is to go out to events and build relationships with investors. So I guess I figured out a way to get paid to do what I want to do.
That's great. So now you found an employer that'll actually pick this up, and you were self-funding it in the beginning. It's kind of the whole don't live to get paid to live. You're getting paid to go on these trips and go to these places, the things you would want to do anyway. And yeah, I think the Investor Summit to See that I went on in 2016, I spent about $10,000 for that, including my flights and everything. But, I think you asked yourself a question at going to some of these high-priced events. Some say, how can I afford it? And I think a person that thinks bigger picture thinks, how could I afford not to go? What are the missed opportunities that are there? And if I don't invest in myself, who else would? So you've demonstrated to so many people that you're willing to invest in yourself. And that's why those other people that turned out to be employers would invest in you.
That's right. Yeah, a few of the first events I had to fund myself. And essentially, I had been saving up to invest in property. But, I knew that I needed to first educate myself. So my first few investments were not in real estate property, but rather in my own education.
That is such a great long-term view, and so few young people have that perspective. I absolutely love it. Well, Inaky, you're moving fast. You're always flying to a lot of places, so it's been great catching up with you for a few minutes. If our listeners want to reach out to you and contact you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. They can just head on to my website at inakystrick.com. That's INAKYSTRICK.com. And if you go on there and there's a contact form, you can request a free book, and I'll be more than happy to send you a copy of The One Thing That Changed Everything for your listeners, Keith.
Of course, you've got your own website already because you have demonstrated that you are willing to invest in yourself. Inaky Strick, thanks so much for coming on to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Keith. It's been a pleasure.
Well, yeah, real estate is a people and numbers business. I spent the first part of today's show running the numbers with you. A lot of investors seem to forget about the people part, but Inaky does not. He puts it first. You know what strikes you about Inaky in person? It's that he's just so likable. And you know what that begins with? He doesn't act like a know-it-all. He's a good listener. Look, in real estate investing, the reason that I think it's actually easier than ever to diminish the importance of interpersonal relationships is because of the ease of reducing communication to a bunch of electrical impulses with email and instant messaging and social media. Today, you are living in a Jetsons world. We all are. We're all kind of living in this world that people dreamed of like 30 or 40 years ago. But you know what? If you want to be the first person to learn about a deal or maybe get some favorable treatment from your property manager or someone else on your team, or even be hired by an employer over somebody else, what if you do the Flintstones thing as well as the Jetsons thing like everyone else does? Okay, you're going to gain a familiarity and a contextual advantage over everyone else. And I've discussed some ways to kind of bridge across both at the same time. Like, for example, I like to use video emails. It's just about as good as sitting directly across from somebody, not quite, but Some people like to say that success in life is defined more by who you know than what you know anyway. But you know what? What if you've got both of those things going for you? That's what live events do. But for you or someone like Inaky, you know where I think it all begins? Where it all begins with traveling to live events and meeting connectors and others, it really all begins with your own self-belief. When you're spending your time and money to attend live events, you have got to believe in yourself enough to have a reasonable assurance that this learning that you're amassing and these friendships that you're building are going to be transferred into something greater than what you've expended. Inaky has self-belief. You know, in business and in life, for some people, I think the most difficult sale of all is you selling you to you. If you can sell you to you, then you have self-belief. You know what? In this life of yours, you've got to continually believe in yourself and continually invest in yourself. And why do all that? Well, I mean, you've got one life to live, so do it just simply because the alternative would be too daunting to endure. If you lack self-belief, even though you've got everything else you need to attend the live event, or buy the next rental property, or ask the attractive girl out, or initiate the 1031 exchange to employ your debt equity, well, then you know what? If you lack that belief, you are the problem because it starts with you. But you know what? I've got some great news for you because you are also the solution. Well, hey, on an upcoming show here, macroeconomist Richard Duncan returns to tell us more about inflation and more about the signs out there that inflation is expected to rise. That would be bad for savers and consumers. That would be good for real estate investors and producers. Hey, special thanks today to Inaky Strick. I know he'd enjoy hearing from you. His website is in the show notes for you. You know that I believe in the power of attending live events, and part of it is that you're just filling your life with great experiences, and who wouldn't want to do that? So that's why you can check out the events that I recommend, and I even show which one of those I'm attending in person so that you can meet me. That's all at getricheducation.com/events. Remember to get my book free in the e-version at getricheducation.com/book. Until next week, I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
If you want to retire in 5 years or less through real estate investing, then pay close attention as I'm about to share my proven recipe with you. This is Brad Sumrock, and I've taught thousands of people just like you how to replace their incomes, quit their jobs, or simply have more income and freedom than they ever thought possible. And we do this by investing in apartment buildings. After starting with no experience, I managed to pocket over $1 million in cash and retire from my 17-year corporate job after only 3 years of apartment investing. And I have hundreds of successful students that have had similar results. If you want to get out of the rat race or simply have more income and freedom in your life, then investing in apartment buildings might be the answer for you. Visit our website at bradsumrock.com to get more information about our upcoming training events. That's bradsumrock.com.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.